I thought my son had found love. I thought I had gained a daughter, but behind her sweet smile was a woman plotting to take everything from me, starting with mocking the one thing I held most dear, my cooking. She humiliated me in front of my entire family. She made me feel small. She made me feel worthless. But what she didn't know was that I'd been watching, listening, and waiting. And when I finally uncovered her real plan, I made sure everyone knew exactly who she really was. This is the story of how my daughter in law tried to destroy me and how I made her regret every single word. My name is Margaret, and for 43 years, I had been the heart of my family's kitchen. My husband Robert always said my lasagna could bring world peace. My son Daniel grew up with the smell of fresh bread every Sunday morning. Cooking wasn't just something I did, it was who I was, it was my love language. Every dish I made carried a piece of my soul, a memory, a tradition passed down from my mother and her mother before her. When Daniel told us he was getting married, I was overjoyed. He had been dating Clara for 2 years, and she seemed perfect. She was beautiful, educated, and always so polite when she visited. She would compliment my cooking, ask for recipes, and even help me in the kitchen. I thought I had finally found the daughter I never had, someone to pass my recipes to, someone to carry on our family traditions. The wedding was beautiful. Claire looked stunning in her white dress, and Daniel couldn't stop smiling. I cried tears of joy that day. I welcomed her into our family with open arms. I gave her my grandmother's recipe book as a wedding gift, a treasure I had protected for decades. She hugged me and promised to cherish it forever. I believed her. I trusted her completely. For the first few months, everything seemed perfect. They would come over for Sunday dinners, and Claire would always thank me for the meal. She would smile and laugh at the table. But slowly, things started to change. It was subtle at first, a comment here, a look there, little things I tried to ignore because I didn't want to believe what my instincts were telling me. It started with small criticisms. She would say things like, "Oh, this dish is a bit heavy, don't you think?" Or, "I read that too much salt isn't good for the heart." At first, I brushed it off. Maybe she was just health conscious. Maybe she was trying to help. But then the comments became more frequent, more pointed, more hurtful. One Sunday, I made my famous pot roast, the same recipe I'd been making for 30 years. Everyone always loved it. But that day, Claire barely touched her plate. When I asked if something was wrong, she smiled sweetly and said, "Oh no, Margaret, it's fine. It's just a little different from what I'm used to." My heart sank, but I forced a smile and nodded. Different. That word echoed in my mind for days. The real turning point came 3 months after their wedding. It was Thanksgiving, and I had spent days preparing the feast. Turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce, sweet potato casserole, pumpkin pie. Everything from scratch, everything made with love. The whole family was coming, Daniel and Claire, my daughter Sarah and her husband Tom, and Robert's brother James and his family. I was so excited. Thanksgiving was my favorite holiday. It was the one day of the year where I could show everyone how much I loved them. Through my cooking, I set the table with my best china. I arranged fresh flowers in the center. Everything had to be perfect, and it was perfect until Claire opened her mouth. We were all seated around the table, passing dishes and filling our plates. Everyone was complimenting the food, telling me how amazing everything looked and smelled. I felt so proud, so happy. And then Claire spoke. She didn't direct her comment to me. She turned to Daniel and said, in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, "You know, Daniel, I think next year we should host Thanksgiving at our place. I've been watching some cooking shows and I've learned some really modern techniques. We could update some of these old fashioned recipes and make them a bit more exciting." The table went silent. Everyone stopped eating. All eyes were on Claire. She smiled innocently as if she had just suggested we try a new restaurant. But I felt like I had been slapped across the face, old-fashioned, exciting. The words cut through me like a knife. My hand started shaking. I gripped my fork so hard my knuckles turned white. Robert reached over and squeezed my hand under the table. Sarah looked horrified. Daniel looked uncomfortable, but he didn't say anything. He just looked down at his plate and kept eating. That hurt almost as much as Claire's words. My own son didn't defend me. He didn't tell her she was wrong. He just sat there in silence while his wife insulted everything I had worked so hard to create. Claire continued talking, completely oblivious to the damage she was causing. She started listing all the ways she would improve the meal: less butter, more quinoa, some exotic spices, presentation techniques she learned from celebrity chefs. She talked and talked, and with every word, I felt smaller and smaller. I felt like everything I had built over 4 decades meant nothing, like I meant nothing. I excused myself from the table and went to the kitchen. I told everyone I needed to check on the pie, but really, I just needed to breathe. I stood at the sink, gripping the counter, trying not to cry. This was supposed to be a happy day. This was supposed to be about family and gratitude. Instead, I felt humiliated in my own home. Sarah came into the kitchen a few minutes later. She put her arm around me and whispered, "Mom, don't listen to her. She doesn't know what she's talking about. Your food is perfect. Everyone loves it." I nodded and wiped my eyes, but the damage was done. Something inside me had shifted. I had been so blind, so eager to accept Claire into our family that I had ignored all the warning signs, but now I couldn't ignore them anymore. After everyone left that night, I sat alone in my kitchen. The dishes were piled in the sink. The leftovers were packed away in the fridge. The house was quiet and empty. I thought about everything Claire had said. I thought about how Daniel didn't defend me. And I realized something. This wasn't just about cooking. This was about respect. This was about power. And Claire was trying to take both from me. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every interaction I had ever had with Claire. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized how calculated she had been, how every compliment she gave me in the beginning was just a performance, how she had been slowly chipping away at my confidence, preparing everyone for the moment when she would take my place as the matriarch of this family. But what hurt the most was Daniel, my sweet boy, the child I had raised, the man I was so proud of. He had chosen her over me. He had sat there in silence while she tore me down, and that betrayal cut deeper than anything Claire could ever say. The next morning, Robert tried to comfort me. He told me Claire was young and foolish, that she would learn respect eventually. But I didn't want to wait for eventually. I didn't want to be the doormat everyone walked over while waiting for things to magically get better. Something had to change. And if no one else was going to stand up for me, then I would stand up for myself. The weeks after Thanksgiving were torture. Claire's comments didn't stop. In fact, they got worse. Every family gathering became an opportunity for her to critique my cooking. She would walk into my kitchen uninvited, open my pantry, and make suggestions about what I should buy instead. She started bringing her own dishes to family dinners, fancy salads, and trendy appetizers that she would place right next to my food. As if we were in some kind of competition, Daniel still said nothing. He would laugh awkwardly when Clara made her comments, or he would quickly change the subject, but he never once told her to stop. He never once acknowledged that what she was doing was hurtful. I started to wonder if he even cared, or worse, if he actually agreed with her. One evening, about 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, Daniel called me. He said he and Claire wanted to talk to Robert and me about something important. My heart immediately sank. In my experience, when someone says they need to talk about something important, it's never good news, but I agreed. We set a date for them to come over for dinner the following Saturday. I spent that whole week anxious and worried. What did they want to talk about? Were they moving away? Was Claire pregnant? Was something wrong with their marriage? I couldn't stop my mind from racing through every possibility. And underneath all of that was a gnawing feeling that whatever they wanted to discuss, it had something to do with me. Saturday arrived, and I prepared a simple dinner. I didn't go all out like I usually did. Part of me was still hurt from Thanksgiving, and part of me just didn't have the energy to impress Claire anymore. I made roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and green beans. Comfort food, the kind of meal that had always brought my family together. They arrived right on time. Claire was wearing a designer dress and carrying a bottle of wine. She kissed me on the cheek and complimented my home, even though she had been here 100 times before. Everything about her felt fake. Every smile, every gesture, every word. I could see through it all now. And once you see someone for who they really are, you can never unsee it. We sat down to eat, and the conversation was awkward and forced. Robert tried to keep things light, asking Daniel about work and talking about the upcoming holidays. Claire picked at her food, barely eating anything. She kept exchanging looks with Daniel, like they were communicating in some secret language. Finally, halfway through the meal, Daniel cleared his throat. Mom, Dad, we have something we want to talk to you about. His voice was serious, almost formal. My stomach twisted into knots. I put down my fork and nodded for him to continue. He looked at Claire, who gave him an encouraging smile, and then he turned back to us. Claire and I have been talking. We think it would be really good for the family if we started hosting more of the holidays and gatherings at our place. Our house is bigger, and Claire is really excited about taking on more of the hosting responsibilities. She's been learning so much about entertaining and cooking, and we think it would be nice to give you a break, Mom. You've done it for so long, it's time for you to relax and let someone else take over. The words hit me like a freight train. Let someone else take over. Give me a break. As if the thing I loved most in the world, bringing my family together through food, was some kind of burden I needed to be relieved of. As if I was too old, too tired, too incompetent to continue doing what I had done my entire life. I looked at Claire. She was smiling at me with that same sweet, innocent expression. But her eyes told a different story. Her eyes were cold and calculating. She knew exactly what this would do to me. She knew this was the final blow, and she was enjoying every second of it. I felt my chest tighten. I felt tears burning behind my eyes, but I refused to cry in front of her. I refused to give her the satisfaction of seeing me broken. So instead, I took a deep breath, forced a smile, and said, "That's very thoughtful of you both. If that's what you want, then of course we can do that." Robert looked at me with concern. He knew I was lying. He knew I was devastated, but he didn't say anything either. What could he say? Our son had made his decision. Our son had chosen his wife over his mother, and there was nothing anyone could do to change that. The rest of the dinner was a blur. I moved through the motions mechanically, clearing plates, serving dessert, making small talk. But inside, I was screaming. Inside, I was falling apart. When they finally left, I stood at the door and waved goodbye, watching their car disappear down the street. And then I closed the door, walked to my bedroom, and cried harder than I had cried in years. Robert held me that night. He told me we could talk to Daniel again, that maybe he didn't understand how much this hurt me, but I knew the truth. Daniel understood perfectly. He just didn't care. Or rather, he cared more about keeping Claire happy than about protecting me. The next few days were some of the darkest of my life. I went through my daily routine, cooking meals, cleaning the house, but everything felt empty and meaningless. What was the point of cooking if no one appreciated it? What was the point of keeping traditions alive if my own family wanted to replace them? I felt lost. I felt invisible. I felt like everything I had built was crumbling around me. But then something changed. One morning I woke up and instead of feeling sad, I felt angry. I was angry at Clara for manipulating my son. I was angry at Daniel for letting her. And I was angry at myself for being so passive, for letting them walk all over me without fighting back. That anger became fuel, it became determination, and it became the beginning of my plan. I started paying closer attention. I started watching Claire more carefully. I noticed things I had missed before, the way she would pull Daniel aside at family gatherings and whisper in his ear, the way she would scroll through her phone constantly, always texting with someone, the way she would make excuses to leave early or arrive late. Something wasn't right, and I was going to find out what it was. My mother always told me that patience is a virtue, but she also told me that patience without purpose is just procrastination. So I decided to be patient, but with a very clear purpose. I was going to figure out what Claire was really up to because deep in my gut, I knew this wasn't just about cooking or hosting holidays. There was something bigger happening, something she was hiding. I started by doing something I never thought I would do. I started listening in on conversations. Not in an obvious way. I would just happen to be in the next room when Daniel and Claire were visiting. I would take a little longer folding laundry or organizing the linen closet. And what I heard confirmed my suspicions. One afternoon, about a week after that horrible dinner conversation, Daniel and Claire came over to drop off some mail that had accidentally been delivered to our house. Robert was out running errands, so it was just me at home. I offered them tea, and they sat in the living room while I prepared it in the kitchen. The kitchen and living room were separated by a half wall, so I could hear everything they were saying. Even though they thought I was out of earshot, Claire was on her phone again, texting frantically. Daniel asked her who she was talking to, and she quickly said it was just her mother. But the way she said it, quick and defensive, made me think she was lying. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. She leaned close to Daniel and whispered, "We need to speed this up. My lawyer says the sooner we establish control of the estate planning, the better." Estate planning. Those two words echoed in my mind. I almost dropped the teacup I was holding. Why would they be talking about estate planning? Robert and I were both healthy. We had our wills in order. Everything was set to be divided equally between Daniel and Sarah when the time came. So why was Claire talking to a lawyer about it? I brought the tea into the living room. Pretending I hadn't heard anything, I smiled and asked about their day. Claire immediately put her phone away and started talking about some charity event she was planning. But I wasn't listening anymore. My mind was racing. It's estate planning, lawyer, speed this up. What were they planning? After they left, I sat down at my computer and started researching. I'm not a technology expert, but I know how to use Google. I started reading about estate planning, elder manipulation, financial abuse, and the more I read, the more terrified I became. There were stories of children and their spouses manipulating elderly parents into signing over property, changing wills, giving away assets. Some of these cases involved emotional manipulation, some involved outright fraud, and all of them started the same way, with small acts of disrespect designed to make the parents feel incompetent and dependent. Was that what Claire was doing? Was she trying to make me feel worthless so that I would eventually hand over control of everything to Daniel? And by extension, to her, it seemed too calculated, too evil, but the more I thought about it, the more sense it made. The cooking criticisms weren't just about cooking, they were about making me feel old, outdated, and useless. And once I felt that way, it would be easy to convince me that I needed help managing my finances, my property, my life. I needed proof. I needed to know for sure what she was planning, so I did something else I never thought I would do. I called Sarah and asked her to help me. Sarah had always been protective of me. She saw how Claire treated me and she didn't like it. When I told her what I had overheard, she was furious. "Mom, we need to find out what's going on. This isn't normal. This isn't right." She agreed to help me investigate. Together, we came up with a plan. Sarah would reach out to Claire and suggest they have lunch together, just the two of them. A bond and experience between sisters in law. Claire, always eager to appear kind and family oriented, agreed immediately. During that lunch, Sarah would try to get Claire to open up. She would ask innocent questions about their future plans, their finances, their goals. And while they talked, I would do some investigating of my own. Daniel and Claire had given us a spare key to their house years ago, in case of emergencies. I had never used it, but this felt like an emergency. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that going into someone's house without permission is wrong. And you're right, it is wrong. But so is plotting to manipulate and steal from your family. And I needed answers. I needed to know if my suspicions were correct. So one Wednesday afternoon, while Sarah was at lunch with Claire and Daniel was at work, I drove to their house. My hands were shaking as I unlocked the door. I felt like a criminal. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting someone to catch me, but the street was quiet. No one saw me go inside. I stood in their entryway for a moment, listening. The house was silent, empty. I took a deep breath and started looking around. I didn't know what I was looking for exactly. Documents, maybe? Emails, something that would confirm what Claire had said about the lawyer. I started in the home office, and it was a small room off the main hallway, filled with filing cabinets and a desk covered in papers. I felt guilty touching their things, but I pushed that guilt aside and started searching. Most of the papers were boring: bills, bank statements, work documents, nothing unusual. But then I found a folder labeled estate plan, tucked away in the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet. My heart started pounding. I opened the folder and started reading, and what I found made me sick to my stomach. Inside were drafts of legal documents, documents that outlined a plan to have Robert and me declared mentally incompetent, documents that would give Daniel power of attorney over all our finances, documents that would transfer ownership of our house, our savings, everything we had worked for our entire lives, into Daniel's name. And at the bottom of one of the pages, in Claire's handwriting, were notes. notes about how to convince us to sign these documents, notes about gradually isolating us from Sarah, notes about making us feel like we couldn't take care of ourselves anymore. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I sat down on the floor, clutching those papers, trying to process what I was seeing. This wasn't just disrespect. This wasn't just meanness. This was theft. This was abuse. This was my daughter in law trying to steal our entire lives, and she was using my own son to do it. I quickly took pictures of every document with my phone. I made sure I captured every word, every signature, every note. Then I put everything back exactly where I found it. I left the house and sat in my car for 10 minutes, trying to calm down. I felt betrayed in a way I'd never felt before, not just by Claire, but by Daniel, because these documents had his name on them too. He knew what she was planning. He was part of it. When I got home, I sent the photos to Sarah. She called me immediately, and I could hear the shock and anger in her voice. Mom, this is fraud. This is elder abuse. We need to go to the police. But I told her to wait. I told her I had a better plan because going to the police would mean a public scandal. It would mean destroying Daniel's life. And despite everything, he was still my son. I still loved him. So I decided to handle this my own way. I spent the next week preparing. I contacted our family lawyer and showed him the documents. He was horrified and immediately helped me put protections in place. We created an ironclad will that couldn't be changed without both Robert and me being present and fully evaluated by independent doctors. We set up a trust that would ensure our assets couldn't be touched. And we prepared a legal cease and desist letter to be sent to Claire's lawyer if they tried to move forward with their plan. But more importantly, I planned my confrontation because I wasn't just going to stop them quietly, I was going to expose them. I was going to make sure everyone in our family knew exactly what kind of person Claire really was. And I was going to do it in the most public, most humiliating way possible. The holidays were approaching again, and Claire had been busy planning what she called the first annual holiday gathering at her house. She sent out elaborate invitations to the whole family. She posted about it on social media. She talked endlessly about the menu she was planning, all modern and sophisticated, nothing like Margaret's old recipes. She was performing for everyone, playing the role of the perfect daughter in law who was graciously taking over family duties. But I knew the truth, and soon everyone else would too. I decided that her big holiday party would be the perfect moment to expose her. She wanted to replace me as the heart of this family. Fine, let her try. But she was going to learn that you don't betray the person who taught you everything without consequences. I accepted her invitation graciously. I told her how excited I was to see what she had planned. I even offered to help her with the preparations, though she quickly declined, saying she had everything under control. Perfect. I wanted her to feel confident. I wanted her to think she had already won. In the meantime, I continued gathering evidence. Sarah and I worked together like detectives. Sarah befriended Claire's assistant at the charity organization where Claire volunteered. Through casual conversations, Sarah learned that Claire had been bragging about how she and Daniel would soon be moving into a much bigger house, my house, once her in laws decided to downsize. Claire had already been measuring rooms and planning renovations. She was spending money she didn't have yet, money she was planning to steal from us. I also discovered that Claire had been spreading rumors about me. And to other family members, she would make comments about how forgetful I was becoming, how I seemed confused sometimes, how Robert and I were struggling to maintain our home. She was building a narrative, creating a story that would make it believable when she eventually claimed we needed help managing our affairs. It was calculated, it was methodical, and it was absolutely disgusting. But every piece of information I gathered just made me more determined. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore, I was fighting for every parent who had ever been taken advantage of by a manipulative child or in law. I was fighting for every person who had been made to feel small and worthless by someone they trusted, and I was going to win. The night before Claire's big party, I barely slept. I went over my plan 100 times in my mind. I had prepared a folder with copies of all the documents I had found, all the text messages Sarah had managed to retrieve, all the evidence of Claire's scheme. I had invited our lawyer to attend the party as our guest, and I had told Sarah exactly when to start recording on her phone. The party was set for 6 o'clock on a Saturday evening. Robert and I arrived exactly on time, carrying a bottle of wine and a bouquet of flowers. Claire greeted us at the door with a huge smile, hugging me like we were the best of friends. She looked beautiful and confident, completely unaware that her entire world was about to come crashing down. The house was decorated perfectly. Soft music played in the background. The dining table was set with expensive china and crystal glasses. Claire had clearly spent a fortune on this party. She led us into the living room where other family members were already gathered. Sarah and Tom were there, Robert's brother James and his wife, a few of Daniel's cousins, and Daniel himself standing by the fireplace looking proud and happy. Claire played the perfect hostess. She offered drinks, made small talk, and accepted compliments on her beautiful home. At 7 o'clock, she announced that dinner was ready and invited everyone to the dining room. The looked like something out of a magazine. Claire had prepared an elaborate meal, things I'd never even heard of. Deconstructed this, sous vide that, foam and drizzle, and microgreens everywhere. It looked impressive, I had to admit. As everyone sat down, Claire stood at the head of the table and raised her glass. She gave a little speech about family and gratitude and new traditions, and then she said something that made my blood boil. She looked directly at me and said, I especially want to thank Margaret for being so gracious about passing the torch. It takes a big person to step aside and let the next generation take over. I know it wasn't easy for you, Margaret, but I promise I'll take good care of this family. The condescension in her voice was unmistakable. She was talking to me like I was a child, like I was someone to be pitied. Everyone else seemed oblivious, smiling and nodding along, but I saw Sarah's jaw clench. I saw our lawyer shift uncomfortably in his seat, and I knew it was time. I stood up slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. Everyone turned to look at me, probably expecting me to give some kind of gracious response to Claire's speech, but I had something very different in mind. I picked up my wine glass and tapped it gently with my fork, the universal signal for an announcement. The room fell silent. Thank you, Claire, for those kind words, and thank you for hosting this beautiful dinner. Yeah, I looked around the table at my family, at the people I loved, and took a deep breath. But before we eat, there's something I need to share with all of you, something important that I've discovered recently. Claire's smile faltered slightly. Daniel looked confused. I reached into my purse and pulled out the folder I had prepared. I opened it and held up the first document so everyone could see. A few months ago, I started noticing some changes in the way Claire treated me. Small criticisms about my cooking, suggestions that I was getting too old to handle family gatherings, comments about how Robert and I might need help managing things. At first, I thought maybe she was just trying to be helpful. And then I overheard something that made me suspicious. I paused, letting the tension build. Claire had gone pale. She was gripping the edge of the table, her knuckles white. I overheard Claire talking to Daniel about estate planning, about a lawyer, about speeding things up, so I did what any concerned person would do. I investigated, and what I found was truly shocking. I pulled out the photographs of the documents and handed them to James, who was sitting closest to me. And please pass these around. I want everyone to see what I found in Claire and Daniel's home office. These are legal documents that outline a plan to have Robert and me declared mentally incompetent. Documents that would give Daniel complete control over our finances, our property, everything we own. And if you look at the notes in Claire's handwriting, you'll see exactly how they plan to manipulate us into signing these papers. The room erupted. James stared at the documents in disbelief. Sarah started crying. Robert's face turned red with anger, but it was Daniel's reaction that hurt the most. He didn't look shocked. He didn't look confused. He looked caught. He looked guilty. And that told me everything I needed to know. Claire jumped up from her chair, her voice shrill and panicked. That's not what it looks like. You had no right to go through our private papers. You broke into our house. I stayed calm. I had been preparing for this moment. Yes, I did, and I'm not proud of that, but I'm glad I did because it confirmed what I suspected. You've been systematically trying to undermine my confidence, making me feel worthless and incompetent. Also, you could eventually convince me to hand over control of my life. That's called elder abuse, Claire, and it's a crime. She turned to Daniel, her eyes desperate. Tell them it's not true. But Daniel just stood there, frozen, unable to speak. His silence was deafening. It was the final confirmation that he had known about her plan all along. Our lawyer stood up and addressed the room. I've reviewed these documents, and Margaret is absolutely correct. This constitutes attempted fraud and elder abuse. I've already taken steps to protect Margaret and Robert's assets. Any attempt to move forward with this plan will result in immediate legal action. Claire's face twisted with rage. She pointed it at me, her voice venomous. You self righteous, meddling old woman. You couldn't just step aside gracefully, could you? You had to be the center of attention forever. Well, guess what, Margaret? Nobody want your dried out pot roast and your boring traditions. The world has moved on and you're just too stubborn to see it. Her mask had finally fallen away completely. This was the real Claire. This was who she had been all along. And now everyone could see it. I looked at my son, who was still standing there in silence, and I felt my heart break all over again. Daniel, I said quietly, say something. Tell me this isn't true. Tell me you didn't know what she was planning. He finally looked at me, and there were tears in his eyes. Mom, I didn't want it to go this far. She convinced me that you and Dad were struggling, that you needed help. She said we were protecting you, protecting us, by stealing everything we've worked for, by trying to have us declared incompetent. I shook my head in disbelief. How could you believe that? Have we ever given you any reason to think we couldn't take care of ourselves? He had no answer, because there was no answer. He had been blinded by his wife, manipulated into betraying his own parents, and now he had to live with that choice. I turned back to Claire. You tried to take everything from me, my role in this family, my dignity, my home, my financial security. You thought I was just some weak old woman who would roll over and let you destroy everything I've built. But you were wrong. I am not weak. I am not incompetent, and I will not be pushed aside by someone like you. I picked up my purse and looked at Robert. We're leaving. I looked around at the rest of my family. Anyone who wants to have a real family dinner, a dinner with real food and real love, is welcome at our house next Sunday. But if you choose to stay here with someone who tried to commit fraud against your family, then that's your choice to make. Sarah and Tom immediately stood up and followed us. James and his wife did the same. One by one, almost everyone at that table got up and walked out of Claire's perfect, beautiful dining room. Only Daniel remained, standing next to his wife, watching as his entire family turned their backs on them. As we walked to our cars, I heard Clara screaming inside the house. I heard things being thrown. I heard Daniel trying to calm her down, but I didn't look back. I had said what I needed to say. I had exposed her for who she really was, and now the consequences were hers to face. The next few days were chaos. Claire tried to do damage control. She called family members, crying and claiming I had misunderstood everything. She posted vague messages on social media about betrayal and family drama. She even tried to show up at our house, but Robert wouldn't let her in. She stood on our doorstep, banging and shouting, until Robert threatened to call the police. Then she finally left. Daniel called me the day after the party. His voice was broken, filled with regret. Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize what she was doing. I thought we were helping. I thought you needed us. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to think that my son had just been misled, that he was a victim of Claire's manipulation, too. But the documents had his signature on them. He had known enough. He had known enough to stop her, and he chose not to, and I told him I needed time. I told him I couldn't just forgive and forget what they had tried to do. He cried on the phone, begging me to understand. But I couldn't. Not yet, maybe not ever. I hung up, and I didn't answer his calls after that. Sarah was furious. She wanted to press charges. She wanted to make sure Claire faced legal consequences. Our lawyer explained that we could pursue a civil case, but criminal charges would be difficult to prove since they hadn't actually succeeded in their plan. We decided to take a middle path. We sent Claire's lawyer a formal cease and desist letter, along with copies of all the evidence we had gathered. We made it clear that any attempt to contact us, to spread rumors about us, or to continue their scheme would result in immediate legal action. The letter worked. Claire's lawyer, probably realizing how much trouble his client was in, convinced her to back off. We never heard from her directly again, but we did hear about her through other people. Apparently, the exposure at the party had destroyed her social standing. The charity organization where she volunteered asked her to step down. Her friends started distancing themselves. People talked. And in a small community like ours, that kind of reputation damage is permanent. Daniel moved out of their house about 3 months later. We heard through Sarah that he had asked Claire for a divorce. She fought it at first, but eventually she agreed. She moved back to her hometown, and as far as I know, she's never tried to contact anyone in our family again. As for Daniel, it took him a long time to work up the courage to reach out again. About 6 months after everything happened, he showed up at our door on a Sunday morning. He looked terrible. He had lost weight. He had dark circles under his eyes. He looked like a man who had lost everything. I didn't know if I could let him in. I didn't know if I could forgive him. But Robert opened the door and invited him inside. We sat in the living room, the same room where I had confronted Claire all those months ago, and we talked, really talked, for the first time in years. Daniel told me everything. He told me how Claire had slowly convinced him that Robert and I were becoming forgetful and confused. She would twist things I said, making normal forgetfulness seem like signs of dementia. She would point out minor home repairs that needed to be done and claim they were evidence we couldn't take care of ourselves anymore. She had been so subtle, so convincing that Daniel had actually believed he was doing the right thing. But then he saw my face at that party. He saw the pain and betrayal in my eyes. And for the first time, he realized that his mother, the woman who had raised him and loved him unconditionally, wasn't some helpless old lady who needed saving. I was strong, I was capable, and he had been manipulated into betraying me. He broke down crying as he apologized. He said he knew I might never forgive him, but he needed me to know that he was sorry, that he had been a fool, that he had chosen the wrong person and made the wrong choices, and that he would spend the rest of his life trying to make it up to me. I sat there listening to my son sob, and I felt so many emotions: anger, sadness, relief, love, because despite everything, he was still my boy. He had made a terrible mistake, but he was owning it. He was trying to change, and that meant something. I didn't forgive him that day. Forgiveness takes time. But I told him I was willing to work toward it. I told him we could start rebuilding our relationship, slowly, one step at a time. And for the first time in months, I saw hope in his eyes. It's been 2 years since that terrible holiday party. 2 years since I stood up in front of my family and exposed Claire for who she really was. And in those 2 years, a lot has changed. Daniel and I have rebuilt our relationship, though it will never be quite the same as it was. There's a scar there now, a reminder of what was broken, but scars are proof that we survived. They're proof that we healed. He comes to Sunday dinners now just like he used to since. He helps me in the kitchen sometimes, learning the recipes I've been making for decades. He asks questions, really listens, and writes things down. He tells me he wants to pass these recipes on to his children someday, when he's ready to have children with someone who actually deserves him. Sarah and I are closer than ever. She tells me all the time how proud she is of me for standing up for myself. She says I'm her hero, which makes me laugh, because I'm just a woman who refused to be pushed around. But I appreciate her support. I appreciate knowing that she'll always have my back. Robert says I'm stronger now than I've ever been. He says that what Claire tried to do to me lit a fire inside me that had been dormant for years. And he's right. I'm not the same woman I was 2 years ago. I'm not afraid to speak up anymore. I'm not afraid to defend myself, and I'm certainly not going to let anyone make me feel worthless ever again. We still host all the family gatherings at our house. My kitchen is still the heart of our family, and my cooking, my old-fashioned, traditional, made with love cooking, is still what brings everyone together, because that's what real family is about, not fancy presentations or trendy ingredients. It's about connection, it's about tradition, it's about showing people you love them in the most basic, fundamental way by nourishing their bodies and souls. I've thought a lot about Claire over these past 2 years. I've wondered if she ever feels remorse for what she tried to do. I've wondered if she ever thinks about the life she could have had, if she had just been kind, if she had just been genuine. But mostly, I've realized that she's not worth my energy. She's a cautionary tale, a reminder of what happens when you let greed and manipulation guide your choices. I've also learned something important about myself. I learned that being kind doesn't mean being weak. I learned that being patient doesn't mean being passive. And I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stand up and fight for what's right, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's painful. There are still hard days. There are still moments when I think about how close we came to losing everything. How, if I hadn't paid attention, hadn't investigated, hadn't stood up for myself, Claire might have succeeded. We might have been manipulated into signing away our home, our savings, our independence. And that thought terrifies me. But then I remember that I did pay attention, I did investigate, and I did stand up. And because of that, we're still here. We're still together. And our family, though changed, is stronger for it. So, what's the lesson in all of this? What's the moral of this long, painful story? I've thought about this question a lot, and I've come up with a few answers. First, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. I ignored my gut feelings about Claire for too long because I wanted so desperately to believe she was good. I wanted to believe my son had found a wonderful partner, but deep down I knew something was off. And I should have trusted that feeling sooner. Second, respect is everything. You can have all the love in the world, but without respect, a relationship is meaningless. Claire never respected me. She saw me as an obstacle, something to be removed, and that lack of respect poisoned everything. If you're in a relationship, whether it's with a partner, a child, a parent, or a friend, and you don't feel respected, that's a problem that needs to be addressed. Third, never underestimate yourself. Society has this way of making older people, especially older women, feel invisible and irrelevant. We're supposed to fade into the background, step aside gracefully, and let younger people take over. But that's nonsense. Age brings wisdom, experience brings strength. And just because I've lived a long life doesn't mean I don't still have value, still have power, still have agency. Fourth, stand up for yourself even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. I could have stayed quiet. I could have let Claire take over and hoped things would work out. I could have been the polite, passive mother in law who never caused trouble. But what would that have gotten me? I would have lost everything. Sometimes you have to fight. Sometimes you have to make noise. Sometimes you have to risk conflict in order to protect yourself and the people you love. And finally, forgiveness is complicated. I've forgiven Daniel mostly, but that forgiveness didn't come easy and it didn't come fast. It took time. It took him showing me through his actions that he was truly sorry and truly committed to change. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending everything is fine. It means choosing to move forward despite the pain while still acknowledging that the pain existed. I think about all the other people out there who might be going through something similar, all the parents who are being manipulated by their children or in laws, all the people who are being made to feel small and worthless by someone they trust. And I want them to know that they don't have to accept it. They don't have to stay silent. They have the right to defend themselves, they have the right to fight back, and they have the right to demand the respect they deserve. It's not always easy to stand up to family. It's not always easy to expose someone you once loved. But sometimes it's necessary. Sometimes it's the only way to protect yourself and the life you've built. And if my story can help even one person find the courage to do that, then everything I went through was worth it. Today, as I write this, I'm standing in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I've cooked thousands of meals over the decades, the same kitchen where I taught my children to bake cookies and make Sunday gravy, the same kitchen that Claire tried to take from me. And I'm making lasagna, my famous lasagna, the one Robert says could bring world peace, the one my family has been eating for 43 years. I'm making it for Sunday dinner tonight. Daniel will be here. Sarah and Tom will be here. James and his family will be here. We'll sit around the table, pass dishes, tell stories, and laugh together. It won't be perfect. No family is perfect, but it will be real. It will be honest, and it will be ours. I've learned that traditions matter, not because they're old or because they've always been done a certain way, but because they connect us to our past and to each other. When I make my grandmother's recipe, I'm not just cooking food, I'm honoring her memory, I'm carrying forward her love, and I'm passing that legacy on to the next generation. Claire wanted to erase all of that. She wanted to replace tradition with trends, depth with superficiality, love with performance. But she failed. because you can't destroy something that's built on a foundation of genuine connection. You can try to knock it down, but it will stand firm. It will endure. I think about the woman I was before all of this happened. I was kind, maybe too kind. I was trusting, maybe too trusting. I wanted everyone to like me, to approve of me. But I've realized that not everyone deserves that kindness and trust. Some people will take advantage of it. Some people will see it as weakness. And those people need to be shown that kindness isn't the same as weakness, that a gentle heart can also have a steel spine. I'm proud of the woman I've become. I'm proud that I didn't let Claire break me. I'm proud that I stood up, spoke out, and protected what was mine. And I'm proud that I did it with grace and strength, without stooping to her level, without becoming bitter or cruel. I simply told the truth. And the truth was powerful enough. My advice to anyone listening to this story is simple: know your worth, protect your boundaries, don't let anyone make you feel less than you are. And if someone tries to take from you what you've worked your whole life to build, stand up and fight. Not with violence, not with cruelty, but with truth, with courage, and with the unshakable belief that you deserve respect. And life is too short to let toxic people steal your joy. It's too precious to spend it trying to please people who will never be satisfied. And it's too valuable to give away to someone who doesn't appreciate what you have to offer. So hold on to what matters, protect the people you love, and never, ever let anyone tell you that your worth is diminished just because you've gotten older or because the world has changed. Because here's the thing about change: real change, meaningful change, doesn't come from abandoning what's valuable. It comes from honoring the past while embracing the future. It comes from knowing which traditions to keep and which to evolve. And it comes from building on a strong foundation, not tearing down everything that came before. Claire didn't understand that. She thought new was always better. She thought modern meant superior, but she was wrong. Some things are timeless, some things are worth preserving, and some things, like a perfectly made lasagna or a family gathered around a table, will never go out of style. As I pull the lasagna out of the oven tonight, I'll think about everything that's happened. I'll remember the pain, the betrayal, the fear, but I'll also remember the strength I found, the family who stood by me, and the satisfaction of knowing that I didn't let someone take what was mine. I stood my ground, I told my truth, and I won. That's the real revenge: not hurting the person who hurt you, not destroying them or making them suffer. The real revenge is living well. It's reclaiming your dignity, it's surrounding yourself with people who value you, and it's continuing to do what you love, what you're good at, what brings you joy, despite everything someone tried to take from you. So if you're out there right now dealing with someone who makes you feel small, who disrespects you, who tries to diminish your worth, I want you to remember this story. Remember that you have power, you have value, and you have every right to defend yourself. Don't wait for someone else to stand up for you. Don't hope that things will magically get better. Take action, find your evidence, gather your courage, and when the moment is right, speak your truth. It won't be easy. There will be tears. There will be conflict. There may be relationships that can't be repaired, but you will survive. You will be stronger, and you will know that you didn't let yourself be a victim. You chose to be a survivor instead. And that choice, that decision to fight back, to stand up, to refuse to be pushed aside, that's the most powerful thing any of us can do. That's how we take our power back. That's how we write our own ending. And that's how we make sure that people like Claire don't win. 5 years have passed since that night. 5 years since I stood in Claire's dining room and exposed her scheme in front of everyone. Time has a way of healing wounds and giving perspective. Today, my kitchen is filled with the laughter of grandchildren. Sarah had twins 3 years ago, and Daniel, after taking time to heal and grow, remarried last year to a woman named Emily, who treats me with genuine kindness and respect. Emily is nothing like Claire. She asks for my recipes because she truly wants to learn. She helps me in the kitchen not to take over, but to be a part of something. She understands that joining a family means respecting what came before you, not erasing it. And watching her and Daniel together, seeing how he's learned from his mistakes, gives me hope. We never heard from Claire again after the divorce was finalized. I heard through distant connections that she moved to another state and started it over. Part of me wonders if she learned anything from what happened. Part of me doubts it. People like her rarely change, they just find new victims. But she's not my problem anymore. She's not my concern. She's just a chapter in my life that's closed. The house still smells like garlic and fresh bread every Sunday. My recipes are still passed down now to a new generation. And every time I teach one of my grandchildren how to make pasta from scratch or how to get the perfect crust on a roast, I think about how close I came to losing all of this, how close I came to letting someone steal not just my possessions, but my purpose, my identity, my joy. But I didn't let that happen. And that makes every Sunday dinner, every holiday gathering, every moment in my kitchen feel even more precious. Because I fought for this, I stood up for this, and I won. This is my story. It's a story about betrayal, yes, but it's also a story about strength, resilience, and the power of knowing your worth. It's a story about not letting anyone, family or otherwise, make you feel less than you are. And it's a story about how sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply continuing to live your life fully, joyfully, and on your own terms. So, to anyone who's listening, who's struggling with a toxic family member, who's being manipulated or disrespected or made to feel small. I want you to know this. You are stronger than you think. You are more valuable than they want you to believe. And you have every right to stand up and fight for yourself. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for the perfect moment because the perfect moment is now. The perfect moment is when you decide that enough is enough. Take your power back, tell your truth, and never, ever let anyone take from you what you've spent a lifetime building because you deserve respect, you deserve dignity, and you deserve to live your life surrounded by people who see your worth, not people who try to diminish it. That's my final lesson. That's what I learned from Claire's betrayal and from my own journey to stand up for myself. And if my story helps even one person find the courage to do the same, then every painful moment, every tear, every sleepless night was worth it. Thank you for listening to my story. Now go live yours. And remember, you're stronger than you know.